Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for another video. Today we are going to be talking all about comparative measurement. So you're going to need a knitting needle, a wooden skewer, a bicycle spoke. Hopefully you have one of those at your disposal. They're the best tools to use, but if you're really desperate you can use a pencil. We're going to talk about how to use comparative measurement, the most helpful measurements that I find personally, and how you can use this to be able to sit down and draw anything, everything, whatever you want to do. Comparative measurement is by far the most flexible measuring system out there in the art world. I mean, you can use certain schematics, or you can use head heights, all these things, but really what is helpful is being able to sit down using a simple stick like this, take measurements from your object, be able to compare them to the measurements in your own drawing, and use that to compare and see how to get the most accurate result possible. Now, we're going to go ahead and get into all of that in the video, but stay tuned for the end for an exciting update. Okay, so I'm going to take my knitting needle here and go ahead and take some comparative measurements on the vase, and then we're going to zoom out and look at the vase and the drawing together and check those measurements on the drawing that's just to the side of the screen here. So first things first, I want to take a half. So I'm going to bring my skewer right to where I think the halfway is, which I know the skewer is a little blurry, but you can see my thumb is right at the bottom of the vase, and the skewer is at this little ridged line in the neck of this little jug here. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep my arm as straight as possible, and then I'm just going to go straight up to check. Okay, it's a little bit too short, so that is not quite the halfway point. Our halfway is slightly higher. So now I'm going to go ahead and move the skewer up a little higher. Same drill, moving my hand straight up. Now to the new point that I think is the halfway, which is right in between these two thinner highlights here. Okay, hand moved a little bit there, but we're getting pretty close to the top. Maybe the halfway is a little bit more this upper skinny highlight right there, so let's check that. Okay. Thumb at the bottom of the vase, tip of the skewer now at the tinier top highlight right there. Moving straight up. Yep, that gets us right about at the top of this lid right there. So that is the overall halfway point of our subject matter. Now we can take a halfway of just from here, the top lip of the jug, to the bottom, just so that we can get another measurement for comparison. So same drill. Now I think the halfway point is probably right about at this engraved line before this big highlight and that big highlight, so right in between those two highlights, I should say. So thumb at the bottom, tip of the skewer right at that engraved line, and up. Okay, a little bit shy there, so it's probably somewhere just higher. So let's go ahead and go a little bit taller. Do just above that engraved line and move it up. Yep, right there. So that is how you get your half. So I checked it there. Now the next most important measurement with comparative measurement, in my opinion, and it's the one that I neglected way too much in my early years at GCA and have definitely implemented it a ton since, is the height to width. So you can check verticals all day long, but if you don't compare a vertical measurement to a horizontal measurement, then your whole drawing can still be wildly out of proportion. We're going to go ahead and take height to width. I'm going to come back to this halfway point of the jug here, which, as I know, is just above that engraved line. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate my hand. So I don't want to move my hand back and forth here. I literally just want to rotate it, which to do so I'm going to have to get my board slightly out of the way. Skewer there, and rotate. Now, what that shows me is that my jug is about as wide as the halfway point. So now let's go ahead and look at our drawing and see how well those two compare. So let's start checking some of the measurements that we took. First things first, let's check. When I started drawing this setup, I actually originally had the lid down. So my original top was this point here because the lid was flat on top of the jug itself. So I'm going to check this halfway point first. So we got it just above the engraved line, which would have it be about right about here. Take that up. Okay. Right, so we do have a little bit of a height thing there where my line, my halfway point is a little bit too high, meaning that my skewer's falling slightly above my jug there. So what I'll probably do in this case, when I flick my eye back and forth, I'm kind of feeling like my engraved line is a little bit too high. So I think that the best solution, rather than changing my height at this point, would be to just slightly nudge this down. So that's one way that you can problem solve with comparative measurement if you don't want to change your heights a ton, which most of us don't. Generally when we're drawing in comparative measurement, we set a top and a bottom, and those are fixed measurements that we base everything else off of, because at the end of the day, you do kind of need one truth, which the truth is a measurement that you set, of course, but once you set the scale of whatever you're working on, you really want to stick to it. So in that vein, I'm not going to bring this line up. I'm instead going to bring this line down. Okay. All right. Now let's check that one. See if that brings us a little bit closer to our half. Much better. Much, much better. So that's what we'll do for all of the measurements. So now I'm going to go ahead and check my height to width. Let's go ahead, now that we have our height, our halfway point, a little bit more set and corrected, I'm going to go ahead, say okay. Right about here, it falls a little bit above that engraved line. Now let's take the width. Okay, so that on the other hand is looking much more accurate. So maybe it's a tiny bit too narrow of a vase, which looking back and forth I do think is true. I think that this can come out to the second line that I have here, which is good because that's why you want to leave yourself options in the early stages of block N. Okay, see how easy that is to now just nudge out without having to redraw the whole thing. Now when it comes to my overall height, like I said, I originally based this and this as my fixed marks. So these are the two that I don't want to change. This one right here I added afterwards. I think you can see my ghost line here, I originally drew it way too small, and I was, you know, completely out of proportion there. And I was like, oh no, it needs to get much bigger, but I still think it actually needs to get bigger because when I look back and forth, it feels much more rounded than the vases, or the little jugs lid right there. So I actually do think that this is going to have to come up in order to get our halfway point correct, but I also think that the line that I have for my little engraved lines over here could come down. That's my initial just impression based off of what I was looking at when we were focusing on measuring. So now we can go ahead and check that. So second line, bring it up. Yep. See, way too definitely a height issue there. The proportion of that is not quite working. Now, again, if I had initially, when I started this drawing, established this is my bottom and this is my top, then I would more likely make adjustments to the rest of the vase in order to make these measurements work and stay the same. Because these were not my initial lines, just process of drawing and deciding, changing my mind as to what I wanted, I'm going to allow this to creep up slightly, and I'm going to creep that line down slightly. So we're going to kind of split the difference. So make a line up there, give ourselves some options, and then we're going to lower both of these engraved lines. I'm going to have to use my eraser here. I wouldn't necessarily be making all of those changes to move these down if I did not see in the jug that they could move down. So if I were looking at this portion of my vase and being like, that line that I originally had, the one up here, is way more accurate feeling based off of what I'm looking at than the one that I just drew, then I'd probably go back to that original line and then source where else I could fix the problem. Because I don't want to just make proportional changes on my drawing based off of nothing. I want to believe that it's the right choice. I want to feel truly like, oh yes, that is a great way to solve that problem, as opposed to making an impulsive change. So because my eyes agree with the measurements that I took, I can go ahead and make those adjustments. If your eyes and your measurements aren't agreeing, slow down, take some more careful measurements. Then if it's still not agreeing, your measurements haven't improved or, gotten closer to what your eyes see, then maybe look elsewhere in your drawing for where something's going wrong, because maybe it's a height to width issue, maybe it's a larger proportional issue that you missed earlier on. So there's definitely usually more than one way to solve a problem. So we're going to check this new halfway now. Much, much better. Now I can just make some quick adjustments. Yeah, already it is feeling better. There's going to be some shape correction that needs to go on now, and I think this side of the lid can kind of fill out, but again, all of that is back to block end problems, but now we have the comparative measurements to help us out and to help us problem solve. When it comes to measurements, we don't want to overly rely on them. We want to be able to draw by eye and get things as accurate as possible without defaulting to measurements. But if you really need to pull out some measurements because you're just really, really stuck and need something to help you along in the process, something not feeling right, then that is the time to implement some comparative measurements, and in particular the smaller comparative measurements. For pretty much any drawing that you're going to do, you're going to take halves in height to widths, but you're probably not going to exactly compare, like, okay, is this narrow neck of the vase the same as the space in between? Those kind of are less helpful. So I hope that gives you a good guideline for how to go about comparative measurements. I think we can leave it at that. I hope that helped answer some questions that any of you might have had about comparative measurement and how to use it. If you do have any questions still, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below. I find it really fun to talk about this kind of nerdy art stuff, and I am not upset at all to take the time to answer any of your questions. On that note, I did want to announce to all of you guys first that I have opened up spots for online mentorships again. I had taken a break from teaching one-on-one students for a while, but I am finally back and ready to take on online students again. I've really enjoyed doing this in the past. It's really fun. I enjoy getting to see what everybody's working on, and I enjoy getting to talk with people one-on-one about any art questions they may have and anything that they just haven't been able to ask in maybe a class setting. So I'm really excited to be bringing back the online mentorships. So if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm going to have an updated page on my website with all of the information, and if you're interested, please feel free to check that out. That's all for now. I'll see you guys in the next video.